Hi everyone and welcome to Thoughts. My name is Katie Moody and on today's show we're going to be talking to Amelia Hilton, a third-year psychology student who is the president of Psychology Society and the host of the psychology podcast Brainscape. Hi Amelia, thanks for coming on the show.
Hiya, thanks for having me.
It's no problem. Amelia is here today to chat to us about her podcast and to give us some speedy summaries of a couple of her programmes for your interest and to entice you all into tuning into her channel. So Amelia, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast started in October 2019 and it is a student hosted and researched podcast, but we also do academic about basically anything that's even slightly relevant to psychology. So we've done episodes based on storytelling and representation. We've done an episode at the stand talking to comedians about audience management and all sorts of things, love, loneliness, fear. So yeah.
Brilliant. And so I believe the speedy summaries that you're giving us are on Love is in the Air and Storytime. So I shall get a timer and you can jump into telling us about Love is in the Air. Are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, you have 60 seconds starting now.
Okay, so Love in the Air covers all things to do with romance. We have speedy studies about whether people have types, how couples meet today, and different aphrodisiacs around the world. Then we looked at physical attractiveness and especially at Tinder and how you can have the best photo for the most matches. So there are various studies which suggest we're more attracted to people who display different types of body language, and various sort of psychology studies have shown women tend to take photos from above so that they appear smaller, which is the stereotype of an attractive woman, whereas men take them from below so they appear bigger and more muscly. And we also interviewed a famous dance psychologist who's nicknamed Dr. Dance about how you can give the sexiest dances in a club to try and get with people, which was really interesting. We also looked at dating and particularly...
Oh, your time is up. I will let you keep going. No, you finish.
We looked at age differences and why there are common differences in what men and women find attractive, dating in your league, dating people who look like your family, which is surprisingly common, the best colours to wear on a date, best first date places, and body gestures and where to meet people. Yeah, there's a lot of great things in that episode.
Yeah, no, so I listened to it, of course, and it was very interesting, especially the how to stand out on Tinder, given that during lockdown, that is the only way to meet people. So I was genuinely taking notes.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well how lockdown may have changed what people are interested in on Tinder, because obviously it's less difficult to meet up with people for sort of more casual things. So the people who present themselves as more long-term or sort of willing to get to know people.
So you think in lockdown it's more common to want to try and find like a partner rather than someone to sleep with?
Yeah, because you have to sort of, you can't meet with them in person, so there has to be some conversation, probably.
That is true. You do have to actually get to know them, which is interesting. Yeah, I also thought it was interesting that in it you said that you shouldn't post a picture when you're laughing too hard, but you should smile with your teeth. Like there's a perfect level of being fun that you have to have.
Yeah, it's similar with the crazy eyes kind of stereotype where, if you're squinting, then people think that you're trying to look cool and attractive. But if you have really wide eyes when you're in a photo, people think that you look a bit insane. And there's all these tiny nuances which are really interesting.
And do you think there are cultural differences? Because I saw that so you said that hip to waist ratio seems to be attractive across like cultures and time.
That's from a famous study by a man called Buss, who did a massive worldwide study across lots and lots of countries with MIT employees about what they find most attractive in different partners. Oh no, sorry, waist hip ratio is actually Sing. I'm thinking of another study. But yeah, so across most cultures, there's a perfect waist to hip ratio, which is where you have a small waist and big hips. And although that does change with times, in the same way that weight and attractiveness concerning that nowadays, well, even in the last 5 years, there's been a more of a body positivity movement. But a few years, especially in the 90s, there was, I think it was called heroin chic.
Oh God, yeah, like Kate Moss.
Really slim, but then you know, back 100, 200 years ago, being larger would have been a sign that you're wealthy and that you have food and sustenance. So
there's definitely evidence that these cultural differences, like our social differences, actually make a difference to who is attracted, like sexual attraction, not just who's. Yeah, that's so interesting. So do you want to now give a summary of the next one, which is story time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, right. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'll try and be faster this time.
No, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
So in this episode, we looked at all of the ways that different stories and narratives can help educate people and children in particular. So how lying in stories and when you're parenting as well can actually be helpful for children and imagination. We looked at different ways that storytelling is used to teach maths and cognition, and also storytelling therapy, where it's used as a sort of therapeutic recovery thing.
And then you also talk about representation in children's storybooks, and then the kind of effects that can have on equality in society sort of later on in the child's life and their views.
Yeah, so it's very common that people who most consider prejudiced don't actually have very much one-on-one experience with people of the group that they are discriminating towards. And one way to kind of try and change that, if there aren't that many people outside of your, you know, ethnic or religious group or that kind of thing living near you, is to sort of foster empathy by having different characters that you read about and empathize with in that way. So there's a lot of research and a lot of conversation at the moment about representation, both in media but in books, especially in children's books. And I think most of the best-selling children's books are written by white men and tend to have sort of very sort of white-centric and heteronormative stories in them. So some people are trying to write books either where the child isn't gendered or the main protagonist isn't gendered, and include lots of different characters of different groups, so that children learn to recognize them and empathize with them from a very young age, because there's some research that shows children tend to start racial and gender labeling really young, like anywhere from 3 to 7, I think the age was. So it's really important to try and show a wide variety of people so that you can foster empathy.
Yeah. So you also spoke about Carl Jung and archetypes. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Jung worked a lot with Freud, and they were both very important in talking about the concept of the subconscious and things underlying human experience that are beyond what you can purposefully access. And he believed that humans are born with heritable psychic structures called archetypes, which are sort of characters and tropes that exist, in his opinion, in all stories throughout humanity. But it's really interesting because although there's been a lot of agreement with him, there's no full list of what these archetypes are. So it's added to all of the time and edited based on new stories, which leads to lots of people saying it's not, you know, if it's altered all the time, they can't be that integral to human stories. But he believed in a thing also called the active imagination, which is where the person interacts with the archetypes and makes sort of newer, slightly altered versions of these universal symbols that everyone has, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Well, thank you very much for your speedy summaries and for chatting to me about your episodes.
Oh, thanks.
I'm sure that many people who listen to this will definitely be tuning into yours because they do sound fascinating. But yeah, thank you very much for chatting to me.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and we'll see you soon. So just as a reminder, Amelia's podcast is called Brainscape. You can find it on Spotify. Where else can you find it, Amelia?
You can find it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Anchor.
Brilliant. Okay. And then you can also, you have a Facebook and an Instagram, I assume, as well, for like...
Yeah, the Psychology Society has a Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, which we post updates on.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.